On my wedding day, my fiancé slipped my wedding ring onto the finger of his childhood friend. He told me that if I couldn't fall in line, he would make her his wife. I simply answered, "All right." The day my wedding ring was stolen, I said all right. The moment the doors to the reception hall closed, the lingering echoes of applause were swallowed by the crystal chandeliers above. We were at a historic luxury hotel on Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. The aisle was surrounded by 120 round tables, completely covered in white lilies and champagne gold roses. In the center of it all, I stood wearing a pure white dress. I am Eleanor Mercer, 29 years old. Today, I was supposed to marry Harrison Sterling, a man I had been dating for 7 years. The ceremony had reached the exchange of rings. The officiant spoke in a calm voice, prompting the groom to present the ring to the bride. Harrison received a small velvet box. The ring inside was one I had spent 3 months choosing. I had visited a high-end jeweler in the Diamond District countless times, having the width and the height of the stone adjusted to perfectly fit my finger. Engraved on the inside, in tiny letters, were my and Harrison's initials. Right then, my smartphone buzzed inside my clutch bag. I had no intention of looking at it, but a single photo displayed on the screen forced its way into my vision. It was taken the night before, at the back entrance of the hotel, at 1:17 inches the morning. Harrison's arm was wrapped around the waist of his childhood friend, Chloe Ashford, the woman who was supposed to be standing nearby as a guest. I raised my head. Harrison was holding the ring box, but he did not walk toward me. His gaze bypassed my shoulder and landed on the guest seating. Standing there was Chloe, wearing a white dress. Her eyes were brimming with tears, making her look like a wounded fawn that the whole world had wronged. Yet, her left hand was reached out forward, far too naturally. "Chloe, Harrison," her voice echoed through the venue over the microphone. It was a soft, sweet voice I had never heard in the 7 years I had been by his side. "This ring belonged to you from the very beginning." The guests at the 120 tables collectively held their breath. The officiant froze with a smile plastered on his face, and a murmur erupted from the family seating areas. My mother grabbed my wrist. Her nails dug into my skin, sending a jolt of pain, but the fact that her hand was trembling hurt me far more. Harrison took Chloe's left hand and slowly slid the ring meant for me onto her finger. The size was astonishingly perfect. It could not have been a coincidence. He had measured her hand in advance. "Eleanor!" He finally turned to look at me. In his eyes, there was no hesitation and no guilt, only irritation and disdain. "If you refuse to be submissive, I will make Chloe my wife. She doesn't doubt me. She doesn't corner me. She doesn't calculate every little thing like a ledger the way you do." Chloe let out a faint sob, crying out Harrison's name, but she made no move to take the ring off. The diamond sparkled on her finger, hiding my and Harrison's initials against her skin. I took exactly one step forward. The 128 pearls I had hand-sewn onto the hem of my dress swayed. On the day of my fitting, the back waist had been slightly loose, so I stayed up until midnight altering it. My mother sat beside me, threading the needles. We barely slept for 2 nights. Sewn into every single one of those tiny pearls were my hopes and my mother's prayers. Harrison's voice was surprisingly quiet. "Are you really okay with this?" He scoffed. "Are you going to make me say more?" "No." I smiled. It was not a smile twisted by the inability to endure. It was the smile of a person who had finally set down a heavy burden they had been carrying for a long time. "All right." Leaving behind that single word, I turned my back on him. The gazes of the entire room pierced my spine. Someone held up a smartphone. Someone whispered a quiet expression of pity. Someone else muttered that this was going to be a disaster. I did not look back. I walked into the bridal suite and locked the door from the inside. The bride in the mirror was still beautiful. My eyeliner had not smudged. My lipstick was untouched. I slowly removed my veil and folded it on the vanity. Beneath it lay another red ring box. It was the ring I had intended to give to Harrison. Inside was a handwritten card. I had rewritten the final sentence 5 times before finally choosing the words, "Let us keep looking in the same direction, side by side." I did not open the box. I took out my smartphone and dialed a saved number. The person answered on the second ring. "Miss Lawson," I said. "You do not need to cancel the reception. Please begin Plan B as scheduled." On the other end of the line, Beatrice Lawson, a female corporate attorney, fell silent for a brief second. "You are truly not hesitating anymore, are you?" "I am not." The Sterlings will come to crush me in earnest. I know, I said, pulling a heavy-duty envelope from my bag. It was sealed with red wax. 3 months ago, as I prepared this, I had prayed the day would never come when I would have to use it. But a prayer was just a prayer. Beatrice, I said, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I am done keeping quiet just to please someone else. Understood. Let us begin then. I ended the call and dug my thumbnail into the edge of the envelope. The sound of tearing paper echoed unusually loud in the quiet room. At that exact moment, someone called my name from outside the door. It was my mother. I put the envelope back into my bag and unlocked the door. My mother stood there in an elegant navy blue evening gown. Pinned to her chest was a small vintage pearl brooch I had bought for her with my first paycheck. It was something she had stopped wearing years ago, claiming the clasp was broken. She looked at me and pressed her lips tightly together. Let us go. That was all she said. I nodded. That day, I did not run away from my wedding venue. I started walking to reclaim my own life. The old office and 3 months of preparation. A black Lexus was waiting in the hotel's underground parking garage. The person holding the rear door open was Beatrice Lawson. She was in her early 40s, wearing a sharp gray pantsuit, not a single hair out of place. When she saw my face, she offered no words of consolation. She merely gave a short nod. I will drive. That was enough. I sat in the back seat next to my mother. As the door closed, the uproar of the venue faded into the sound of a distant world. My mother had both hands clenched tightly in her lap. I wrapped my hands around hers. They were as cold as ice. Eleanor. Yeah. I could not say anything in there. Is this really okay? After what he did to you. I shook my head. I saw you trembling. Mom, that was enough. Tears welled up in my mother's eyes, but she did not cry. My mother had always been the kind of person to straighten her spine before shedding a tear. She had lost her husband early, raised me while bowing her head to relatives, and even tried to sell her old rings to gather funds for me when my company was struggling. The car left Midtown and headed toward a gritty warehouse district in Brooklyn. We arrived at an old 7-story building. 3 years ago, when I founded my tech startup, this was the first office I rented. The rent was $800 a month. In the winter, the wind blew through the window cracks, and in the summer, the air conditioning did not work. Harrison never visited. He simply laughed and asked what I was doing in a dump like that. The main elevator was broken, leaving only a small freight lift operational. Leaving my mother in the car, Beatrice and I went up to the 7th floor. A yellow emergency light flickered in the hallway, casting long shadows at our feet. When I unlocked the room, an old desk, stacks of white cardboard boxes, and an unopened laptop came into view. Pinned to a whiteboard on the wall were photographs, timelines, bank transfer records, copies of corporate registries, and hotel receipts. Red and blue markers were used to draw lines, circle details, and write annotations. Beatrice stopped in front of the board. You were preparing to this extent? Since 3 months ago. Why 3 months ago? I answered as I opened a cardboard box. The day he told me I just would not understand. March 12th. An unforgettable date. At 3 p.m. that day, Harrison texted me saying he would be working late. Taking his word for it, I had started slow-cooking braised beef short ribs. But that evening, I happened to spot his car in an underground parking garage in Tribeca. The entry time was 4:05 p.m. The car was parked beneath the building of the design firm where Chloe worked. I took a picture and sent it to Harrison. 6 minutes later, he replied, claiming he was just picking her up because her car had broken down. He came home past 11 that night. I had placed the cold stew on the dining table. He took one bite and frowned. It is cold. It would have been hot if you had not been late. He did not question the meaning behind my words. He took a shower and, with his hair still wet, looked at the printed photo I had left on the table before finally sitting across from me. Eleanor, Chloe and I have known each other for over 20 years. She is like a little sister from the neighborhood. You might not understand, but relationships like that exist. If you have been together for 20 years, why did you not marry her? He did not answer. After a long silence, he spoke in a low voice. Things are not that simple. He then went into his home office and locked the door from the inside. Late at night, I could hear his voice leaking through the door as he talked to someone on the phone. I could not hear the exact contents, but I could gauge the temperature of his tone. It lacked the irritation he directed at me. Instead, it carried a soft, comforting warmth meant for Chloe. That night, I wrote the first line in my secure digital notepad. If he doesn't return, I will walk on my own. It started as a simple note, but from then on, I gathered evidence piece by piece. GPS records, hotel receipts, recovered data from deleted messages, corporate registries. I tracked funds moving from Harrison's personal bank account to a third-party account. Chloe was his main mistress, but she was not the only one. There was another woman he stayed with at a ski resort in Aspen, overnight trips to a beach house in the Hamptons, and late-night credit card charges during his business trips. He called me an overbearing woman, but the things he hid from me were vastly more numerous. Beatrice flipped through a file on the desk. This is the prenuptial supplementary agreement Harrison tried to make you sign, correct? Yes. The contents are highly malicious. Joint management rights to all new technology, client data models, and credit scoring algorithms generated within 2 years of marriage. It isn't a standard prenup. He said it was so we could support each other as husband and wife. I laughed. There is no phrase more conveniently abused than supporting each other as husband and wife. Beatrice closed the file. And the initial author of this draft is Chloe Ashford. Yes. She forgot to delete the revision history metadata. Ashford Consulting LLC, the company Chloe had established, was ostensibly a management consulting firm for small businesses, but part of its client list perfectly matched data leaked from my company. The structure of her proposal materials, risk evaluation models, and even the calculation formulas for estimates were identical. Harrison had not just betrayed his fiancée. He was trying to lay my company, my credibility, and the work I had built over years at Chloe's feet. I booted up the new laptop and downloaded an encrypted folder from the cloud. As the loading bar stretched across the screen, I watched the wind peel back the old duct tape sealing the window gaps. The broken engagement was never the main issue, I said. What I am really taking back isn't a man, but my life's work. Hearing those words, Beatrice smiled slightly for the first time. Then let us lay everything out at tomorrow's family meeting. Yes. I packed the laptop into my bag. They think I am going to cry and apologize. I am sure they do. That is why tomorrow, I will show them the ledger. I turned off the lights in the old office. Only the yellow emergency light remained in the hallway, stretching our shadows long and thin. I knew I was never going back. There was no place for me to return to, not at that wedding venue, and certainly not with the Sterling family. A single debt clearance document at the family meeting. At 3 o'clock the next afternoon, I brought my mother and Beatrice to an exclusive private dining club in the Upper East Side. It was the establishment the Sterling family always used when discussing internal family matters. The oak room featured mahogany walls and expensive floral arrangements. It was the exact place my mother had first met Harrison's parents. On that day, Harrison's mother had looked at my mother's simple dress and smiled thinly, remarking on how frugal my family must be. My mother had just bowed her head and thanked her. In the car ride home, my mother had not spoken a single word. Inside the private room, 6 place settings were arranged. At the head of the table sat Harrison's father, Richard. Next to him was Harrison's mother, Caroline. Harrison sat beside her, and Chloe sat to his right, wearing a pale blue dress. She had applied heavy makeup to hide her swollen, cried-out eyes from yesterday. My mother had arrived early, and sat with perfect posture in the seat closest to the door. She had not touched her teacup. I took the empty seat. Beatrice stood slightly behind me, positioned perfectly as my legal counsel. Richard was the first to speak. Eleanor, we did not call you here to condemn you. I heard about yesterday from Harrison. I am sure you were emotional. However, walking out of a Sterling family reception in such a manner was incredibly disrespectful. Disrespectful. To them, my leaving the venue was a far greater insult than my fiancé slipping my ring onto another woman's finger. Caroline put down her teacup. Chloe is Harrison's childhood friend. She is like a sister to him. If you suspect her excessively, it hurts Chloe too. Chloe's shoulders trembled slightly. Eleanor, I really did not mean for that to happen. Harrison just suddenly did it yesterday. I did not look at her. I turned my eyes to Harrison. Harrison, was there truly nothing between you and Chloe Ashford? The room went silent. The faint clinking of silverware echoed outside the door. Harrison stared back at me, let out a deep sigh after a long pause, and spoke. Eleanor, that's enough. I'm sick of your habit of investigating everything. Chloe doesn't snoop through my phone. She doesn't track my movements. And she doesn't turn our daily life into an interrogation like you do. Yes, I went too far yesterday by putting the ring on her, but you drove me to do it. With those words, my last ounce of hesitation vanished. I opened my bag and placed a single document on the table. It was a debt clearance confirmation stamped with a red certified seal. Richard picked it up first. As he read through it, a deep crease formed between his eyebrows. What is the meaning of this? Exactly what it looks like, I explained flatly. 3 years ago, the Sterling family provided $15,000 to my company. By contract, it was not an investment, but a loan with a 12% annual interest rate. Over 3 years, I have repaid the principal and the interest, totaling $17,685. Last month, I received this clearance confirmation from the Sterling legal department. Caroline's face changed color. Why would you repay something like that exactly by the book? If it were not for that $15,000, your company would never have gotten off the ground. Yes. That is why I am grateful, and that is why I repaid it in full, including the interest. I looked directly at her. But Caroline, you cannot charge someone interest and later call it charity. If you expected repayment, it was a debt. If you wanted to call it a favor, you should not have made it a loan contract in the first place. Caroline's lips trembled. My mother, sitting next to me, took a small breath. My mother had always felt inferior to the wealthy Sterling family. They had helped fund my startup, introduced a top doctor when she was hospitalized, and advanced part of the wedding costs. Because of that, she believed we had no choice but to keep our heads down no matter what was said to us. But she was wrong. We had returned everything we received. The loan was paid off, the doctor's fees had been settled in full at standard rates, and the advanced wedding expenses had been completely reimbursed. The Sterling family no longer had any reason to look down on us. Richard placed the document on the table. Eleanor, was this your plan all along? No, not from the beginning. I pulled out a copy of a draft contract. This began the day Harrison demanded my signature on this prenuptial supplementary agreement. Richard looked at his son. Harrison, what is this? Harrison's expression shifted slightly. It is just a standard prenup. A normal arrangement to manage our joint assets after marriage. It isn't standard, Beatrice interjected quietly. This draft explicitly lists joint management rights over Eleanor's proprietary client credit evaluation models, supply chain risk systems, and investment algorithms. This drastically exceeds the scope of a standard marital asset agreement. I spoke to Harrison. You told me this was for us to support each other as husband and wife. But when I checked the revision history of the draft, the initial author was Chloe. Chloe's face instantly went white. That is a misunderstanding. I just formatted the document for him. Formatting doesn't involve listing my company's core assets item by item, Beatrice continued. The electronic data has been authenticated with a timestamp by a third-party agency. It is fully admissible as evidence in a lawsuit. The atmosphere in the room shifted entirely. Finally, they realized what was happening. This was not a family dispute caused by a bride throwing a tantrum. This was a case of corporate espionage and unfair competition. I placed a third document on the table. Ashford Consulting, LLC. Managing Member, Chloe Ashford. Established on November 17th last year. Starting capital, $10,000, of which $4,700 was wired from Harrison's personal account through an intermediary account belonging to Chloe's cousin. Clue began to shake. Eleanor, it is a misunderstanding. I just wanted to start my own business. Harrison only helped me a little bit. I never intended to steal anything from you. I took out my smartphone and played an audio recording. Chloe's voice filled the room. Harrison, are you sure we won't get caught? Eleanor is sharp with numbers. What if she realizes my client list overlaps with hers? Then, Harrison's voice. She is too busy with the wedding preparations. She won't notice now. Even if she does, I will shut her up. Eleanor hates making a scene more than anything. Once we are married, I will gradually transfer the management rights over to you. She is stubborn, but in the end, she will have no choice but to leave it to me. The recording stopped. No one said a word. Chloe's lips were quivering, and the blood had drained from Harrison's face as he stared at me. Richard gripped his fists, and Caroline clutched her chest. I looked around at all of them. You think you ruined my wedding yesterday. But you are wrong. It was broken a long time ago. The day Harrison told his first lie, the day I believed it, the day you all mistook my silence for weakness, it was already broken. Richard was a businessman. He was a man who made decisions based on profit and loss, not emotion. He immediately lowered his voice. Eleanor, state your terms. An apology? A settlement? If we can resolve this through discussion, The Sterling family is willing to negotiate. I have 4 terms. I placed a formal legal notice drafted by my lawyer onto the table. First, Harrison and Chloe will issue a public apology admitting to the humiliation at the reception and the misappropriation of trade secrets. Second, Ashford Consulting LLC will be liquidated, and all use of my company's data, models, and client lists will cease immediately. Third, payment of $350,000 in direct damages and lost profits. Fourth, Harrison will permanently waive any future claims to my company's assets. Caroline shrieked. $350,000? Are you out of your mind? If this goes to court, the amount will increase. Chloe grabbed Harrison's sleeve. Harrison, say something. I cannot pay that. You were the one who told me to start the company. You gave me the files. You even said giving me the ring was your way of making things right. Harrison did not hold her hand back. In that moment, Chloe finally seemed to understand. A man's affection is only beautiful when he doesn't have to take responsibility. The moment a $350,000 lawsuit was shoved in his face, his love started doing the math. I stood up. I will leave the rest to Miss Lawson. As I walked toward the door, Harrison called my name. Eleanor, are you really going to take it this far? I looked back. I did not destroy anything. I merely dragged what you did into the light. I paused for a moment before continuing. If doing that was enough to destroy it, it must have been something that could not withstand the light to begin with. Just as the door closed, I heard Richard shouting, and the sound of a teacup shattering against the wall. I never looked back. The viral video and the price of their feelings. At 5 o'clock that afternoon, official legal notices from Beatrice's office were served to the Sterling Group headquarters and Ashford Consulting LLC. Around the same time, a video from the wedding reception was leaked online. It was unclear who filmed it. The video was short. It showed Harrison walking over to Chloe with my ring, saying it belonged to her from the start. It showed him slipping it onto her finger, turning to me, and declaring he would make her his wife if I would not be submissive. Finally, it showed me smiling, saying, "All right," and walking away. The comment sections exploded overnight. Wedding ring drama with a childhood friend? This is way too much. Wait, does the ring have the bride's initials in it? And he gave it to the side chick? The scariest part is the bride not screaming or crying. She definitely has an ace up her sleeve. The childhood friend is crying, but she ain't taking the ring off. Laugh my ass off. The Sterling family immediately contacted PR firms to have the video taken down, but the more they tried to erase it, the faster it spread. By the next day, the news that Ashford Consulting had been served a notice for trade secret misappropriation was leaked, and the conversation shifted from a canceled engagement to corporate espionage. At first, Chloe played the victim. She posted on a private social media account. I am so confused by how sudden this all is. I never meant to hurt anyone. But soon enough, a photo surfaced of her at a jewelry store on Fifth Avenue trying on the exact size of my ring a week prior. Furthermore, internet sleuths dug up her company's establishment date, Harrison's money transfers, and sales emails she had sent to clients overlapping with my company. Public opinion turned against her instantly. Chloe sent me a frantic text message. Eleanor, I am so sorry. I just trusted Harrison. I do not understand business stuff, and he told me the files were fine to use. Please, can you drop the lawsuit? I cannot pay $350,000. I took screenshots of everything and forwarded them to Beatrice. She replied immediately. Excellent material for an admission of guilt. I could not help but laugh. Chloe was so busy playing the victim, she did not realize she was actively strengthening our evidence. On the third night, Harrison appeared outside my office building. It was pouring rain. He stood near the entrance in a soaked suit without an umbrella. His usually perfectly styled hair was plastered to his forehead, and he looked pale. The security guard caught my eye, but I raised a hand to stop him. Eleanor, his voice was hoarse. I want to talk. If it is about the settlement, talk to my lawyer. No, that isn't it. Then we have nothing to talk about. I tried to walk past him. He grabbed my wrist with desperate strength. Let me go. I never thought it would turn out like this. Like what? That the video would leak? Your father would get furious, your company would be dragged in, and Chloe would be sued? I looked at his hand. I used to imagine a future where a ring sat on that finger. Now, the coldness of his wet skin was simply repulsive. The only thing you regret isn't that you hurt me. but that this turned into a massive scandal. Harrison caught his breath. No, I really am sorry. I never should have said that at the reception. I never should have put the ring on Chloe. I just wanted to test you. I wanted to make you realize how important I was. You tested me by putting my ring on another woman in front of my mother? He could not answer. I asked him quietly. Harrison, did you love me? He looked shocked, likely not expecting to be asked such an obvious question. Of course I did. Then why did you give my company's data to Chloe? His face turned chalk white. Why did you try to claim joint management of my core assets in the prenup? Why did you tell me you deleted those messages because of a system update? Why did you tell me I was difficult and unsubmissive every time I asked a simple question? The rain grew heavier, I continued. You did not love me. You loved a convenient woman who would quietly clean up your mistakes, pretend to believe your lies, and ultimately fold to your will. Eleanor is no longer that woman. His fingers slowly loosened around my wrist. What if I force Chloe to liquidate her company, pay the damages, and we start all over? Impossible. Why? I stared at the raindrops falling from the edge of my umbrella. Because I do not let dirty things back into my house. Those words must have been heavier to him than any insult. Harrison froze in the rain. The ring was yours, he muttered. But it was put on the wrong person's hand. I will buy a new one, whatever design you want. It isn't about the ring. I turned and walked toward my car. He called my name in a low voice one last time, but I did not look back. The trial began 2 months later. The Sterling family hired a high-profile corporate law firm from Manhattan. Chloe hired a separate lawyer. From the start, they were not on the same boat. The Sterlings tried to pin all the responsibility on Chloe, while Chloe claimed Harrison had handed her the documents. We presented our evidence methodically. The routing history of the data, the cloud edit logs, the creation timestamps of the prenup draft, the flow of funds, GPS car records, hotel receipts, and auto-synced files found on an old social media account Harrison thought he had abandoned. That account contained more than just records of him sending data to Chloe. It contained his messages with other women. The Aspen ski resort, the Hamptons beach house, late-night taxi receipts. Chloe's expression shattered. She must have thought she was Harrison's one and only. But she, too, was just another conveniently chosen option. On the witness stand, Chloe finally broke down. I am not the only one at fault, Harrison told me. He said that once he married Eleanor, her company's assets would become his. He told me I just needed to set up the business first. The judge ordered her to calm down, but she pulled out her smartphone. I have a recording. The Sterling lawyers turned pale. Harrison screamed her name. The audio played in the courtroom sank him entirely. Eleanor isn't the priority. She is stubborn, but once we are married, I will manage her company's assets. Just use her model to grow your company first. I will funnel the Sterling resources to you later. The courtroom fell dead silent. I listened to his voice as if it were an object from a distant planet. Once, I had never doubted a future where I would go home to this man. I memorized his favorite coffee beans, ironed his shirts before business trips, and went shopping with my mother to choose a birthday gift for his. But all the while, behind my back, he was discussing how to carve up my company. Beatrice whispered, "We will submit this as corroborating evidence." I nodded. The outcome was decided that day. The ruling found Ashford Consulting liable for trade secret infringement and unfair competition, ordering the payment of $300,000 in direct damages, lost profits, and investigative costs. Harrison was found jointly liable as the central figure in the data leak and infringement conspiracy. Concurrently, the Sterling Group Board of Directors announced Harrison's suspension from his executive duties. Surrounded by reporters on the courthouse steps, a microphone was pushed toward me. "Miss Mercer, are you satisfied with the verdict?" "I am satisfied. Do you still feel anger over what happened at the wedding reception?" I thought for a moment. "I feel gratitude." The reporters murmured in confusion. If he had not acted the way he did at the reception, I might have wasted a little more of my time. I am grateful I was able to cut my losses early. That evening, the headlines rolled out. Female CEO who lost her fiancé at the altar strikes back in court. Praised for cutting losses early comment. Sterling heir suspended. I did not read the articles to the end. I placed my smartphone face down and called my mother. I won. My mother's voice choked up on the other end. "Welcome back, Eleanor." "Yeah." I looked out the window. The rain had completely stopped. "I accept your apology, but I do not forgive you." Following the verdict, Chloe came to my office building exactly once. She was wearing a white coat. The soft, radiant aura she possessed at the reception was gone. Her cheeks were hollow, and heavy dark circles shadowed her eyes. As I walked out of the lobby, she immediately rushed over. Eleanor, her voice was thick with tears. I realized how badly I messed up. I was tricked by Harrison. I am a victim too. I stopped walking. A victim? Yes. He told me his marriage to you was just on paper. He said you were just a business necessity and that I was the one he truly loved. He said taking the company files was fine because they would be his once you were married. Chloe, I cut her off. You're not a victim. Her face stiffened. When you used my data to pitch to clients, you were not a victim. When you stood in my place of honor at my wedding, crying but refusing to take off my ring, you were not a victim. When you sent proposals under your company's name to my clients, you did so of your own free will. Now that you can no longer foot the bill, you just want to stand on my side. Her lips trembled. Then what am I supposed to do? That is your problem. I left her there and started walking. I heard sobbing behind me, but I did not turn around. Tears do not wash everything away. Tears shed while still holding on to stolen goods are nothing more than self-pity. The last time Harrison came to see me was 6 months later. It was the day my company concluded its Series B funding round and held a press conference. As I walked toward the parking lot after leaving the venue, he was standing next to an old sedan. He had lost weight. The confidence and the arrogant demeanor he once used to look down on me were completely gone. His shirt collar was slightly wrinkled, and his shoes were unpolished. Eleanor, Miss Mercer. When he corrected how he addressed me, his face twisted slightly. You will not even let me call you by your first name anymore. We are no longer in a familiar relationship. He pulled a red ring box from his pocket. I knew immediately what it was. It was that ring, the one that was slipped onto Chloe's finger, the one that became photographic evidence in court, the one I had chosen. I got it back. He opened the box. The diamond had been cleaned and reflected the dim lights of the parking garage. This originally belonged to you. Throw it away. His fingers froze. You do not want it? I do not. But you spent 3 months picking it out. Yes. But it was placed on someone else's hand. I'll buy you a new one. Any design you want. I'll get it re-engrave. I felt a wave of exhaustion. He still believed that if he just replaced the object, he could erase the past. Harrison, a new ring will not stop my mother's hands from trembling at that reception. It will not erase the fact that you leaked my company's data. It will not erase your voice telling me I was unsuited for you. I want to compensate you. Pay the compensation in installments as ordered by the court. He smiled bitterly. You really treat everything like a business transaction, do you not? If I do not, you will just use my emotions again? After a long silence, Harrison spoke in a low voice. Can we really never go back? We cannot. If that reception had not happened, would things have been different? I shook my head. No. We passed the point of no return long before that. The day you told your first lie and I pretended to believe it. The day you mistook my compromises for weakness. The day you tried to use my hard work as someone else's stepping stone. It was already over right then. A tear fell from his eye. I looked at that tear and realized my heart did not waver in the slightest. It was strange. In the past, if he merely looked a little tired, I would worry, choose my words carefully, and swallow my own feelings so as not to hurt him. Now, I simply thought, so this man knows what pain feels like too. Eleanor, I am sorry. I accept your apology. A spark of hope returned to his eyes for a split second. But I do not forgive you. The light died. I got into my car. Just before the door closed, he called my name, but I did not look back. 1 year later, I bought my mother a new brooch. It was a small, elegant piece made with genuine seawater pearls. On the night of her birthday, I pinned it to her dress. This must have been expensive. You are worth that much and more, Mom. My mother smiled shyly in front of the mirror. This was the woman who had worn an old brooch on a simple navy gown. Clutching my hand in trembling fear on the day of the ruined wedding, she no longer needed to make herself small to please others. Eleanor. Yeah? I used to always think that I just wanted you to have a good marriage. That was all I thought about. I know. But now, it is different. Marriage or no marriage, it doesn't matter. The only important thing is that you never sell yourself short. I hugged my mother from behind. I will never do that again. Promise. Promise. Since then, I was incredibly busy. The company grew rapidly. Our credit scoring model proved highly effective for small business financing, leading to a series of partnerships with regional banks and logistics companies. The business the Sterlings had once looked down upon as a tiny mail-order support firm had grown into a major industry player just a few years later. On the day of our IPO, I stood on the balcony of the New York Stock Exchange to ring the opening bell. In the VIP gallery were my mother and Beatrice. My mother wore her new pearl brooch proudly, and Beatrice raised a glass of champagne in her sharp white suit. As I rang the bell, my mind inexplicably drifted back to that old Brooklyn office. The wind blowing through the taped windows, the flickering yellow emergency light, the sentence I typed into my secure notes late at night. If he doesn't return, I will walk on my own. I was terrified back then. My hands were shaking, but I still typed it. I wrote it down, gathered evidence, reviewed the contracts, paid off the debt, and asked for help from the people who mattered. People are not strong from the start. But if you refuse to take a step backward day after day, by the time you realize it, you are already moving forward. Following the IPO, I reunited with Julian Thorne at an industry networking event. He was a partner at a prominent M&A fund, known for being relentlessly cold and formidable. The first time he reviewed my business proposal, he pointed out 47 flaws. I countered 31 of them on the spot, took the remaining 16 home, and fixed them in 2 days. At our next meeting, he finished reading the revised document and said flatly, "You are tough, Miss Mercer. I thought you hated giving compliments, Mr. Thorne. I compliment facts." That was how it started. He was not a man who strung together beautiful words, but he read every document with absolute sincerity, sparred with me mercilessly in debates, and understood that what I needed was never comfort, but options. One day, when I was struggling with a complicated acquisition deal, he dropped a thick stack of files onto my desk. "How do you want to play this, Eleanor?" I could not answer for a moment. Harrison used to always say, "You do not understand. Do not meddle. Just be submissive." Julian said, "How do you want to play this?" It was a question that proved he believed I was a person capable of winning. Our romance began very slowly. Beatrice joked that our romantic due diligence phase was entirely too long. I replied that being cautious was perfectly fine. Julian, sitting next to me, nodded with a completely straight face. Marriage is a long-term investment, after all. Beatrice laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. Watching them, I felt a quiet warmth spreading in my chest. I no longer needed to entrust my worth to someone else's ring, but the day had come when I wanted to walk side by side with someone again. It was not a defeat. It was a new kind of strength. A man who doesn't need you to be compliant. Julian Thorne proposed to me in the car on the way back from my mother's birthday dinner. There was no flashy production. We had dined in a private room at an excellent restaurant with my mother, Beatrice, and a few close friends. Since my mother had had a bit too much wine, we sent her home in a cab first, and Julian and I walked slowly through the city night. The early summer breeze felt wonderful, and the leaves on the street trees rustled softly. After getting into his car, he did not start the engine immediately. "Eleanor." "Yes?" "Do you mind if we talk about something other than investments for a moment?" "That is rare for you." He smiled wryly and pulled a box from the center console. It was a navy blue ring box. My breath hitched. The memory of my canceled wedding was no longer painful. Even so, the sight of a ring box quietly brushed against an old scar inside me. A ring can be a blessing, a restraint, or an instrument of humiliation. I knew that all too well. Julian opened the box. The ring was incredibly simple, a modest diamond set on a thin platinum band. Engraved on the inside were tiny letters, "Eleanor belongs to Eleanor." The moment I saw those words, the back of my eyes grew hot. "This isn't meant to bind you." Julian's voice was low and direct. "Marriage doesn't mean you have to surrender your edge. You do not have to hide your strength. You never have to be submissive." He looked at me. "I want to stand beside you, not stand in front of you to protect you, not manage you from behind, but be the person looking at the same map right next to you." I stayed silent for a long time. Then, I slowly reached out my hand. "Julian? Yes?" "I absolutely hate wedding drama." He nodded seriously. "I will not cause any. This ring will only ever be placed on your hand." I let out an unexpected laugh. "That is crucial. I acknowledge it as a top priority." I held out my hand. He slipped the ring on. The cold metal touched my skin and slid smoothly down to the base of my finger. There was no pain. There was no suffocation. Just a quiet unraveling of something deep inside my chest. We kept the wedding small. It was not in a Manhattan luxury hotel. And there were no 120 tables. It was held at a small garden restaurant in the Hudson Valley. We only invited my mother, Beatrice, my company's founding members, and Julian's close friends. The floral arrangements were simple whites, blues, and greens. I did not wear the dress with the 128 hand-sewn pearls. That dress was packed away in a box. I had not thrown it out, nor did I hate it. It simply had fulfilled its purpose. It was the dress that let me walk straight out of the most miserable place on earth. It was not a garment of defeat. It was the armor I wore on the day I took my life back. On this day, I wore a light, breezy white dress. No long train, no complicated embroidery, just a simple dress that let the wind pass through. My mother adjusted my veil. In the mirror, her eyes were already shining with tears. "Eleanor, yeah? You look truly happy today." I looked at my mother through the mirror. "I am. I really am. Are you not scared?" "A little bit. If I am being honest." My mother smiled in relief. "If you can step forward even when you are scared, you will be just fine." Julian was waiting beneath a floral arch. When he saw me, his eyes softened just a fraction. It was not a grandiose smile, but I already knew his love showed itself not in an abundance of words, but in the shape of absolute trust. During the ceremony, I did not think of Harrison once. Even during the exchange of rings, the Fifth Avenue Hotel, Chloe's crying face, and Harrison's contemptuous eyes did not cross my mind. The only thing I remembered was the version of myself who took off her veil in the bridal suite and tore open that red-sealed envelope. I was terrified that day. Walking my mother out of that room, preparing to wage war against the Sterling family, throwing away a 7-year relationship, it all terrified me. But I opened the door anyway, and because I did, I was standing here today, taking Julian's hand. "Eleanor Mercer, I look forward to spending the rest of my life with you." I looked at him. "Julian Thorne. Yes, do not make me regret this." He laughed softly. "I will work hard to ensure you do not, because I know that if I make a mistake, you have the strength to walk away at any time. I will never stop working for this." That sounds like a lot of pressure. It is the necessary amount of pressure. A ripple of laughter went through the small crowd. Beatrice was in the front row, pressing a handkerchief to her eyes. My mother was crying, clutching the pearl brooch on her chest. After the ceremony, a young employee from my company approached me. "Boss, after everything that happened before, weren't you scared to get married again?" I thought for a moment. I was scared. But because I was scared, I finally learned how to choose. In the past, I just wanted to be chosen by the person I loved. To be chosen, I stayed a little quiet, endured a little more, and made myself a little smaller. When all those little bits piled up, the outline of who I was started to fade. Now, before anyone else chooses me, I choose myself. Whether to continue a relationship or end it, whether to trust or step back, whether to cry, sue, or laugh and let go. Never handing that power of choice over to anyone else. That was what love meant to me. A few years later, I gave a lecture at a university. The theme was risk management and career building for female entrepreneurs. At the end of the lecture, a female student raised her hand. "Miss Talenti www. Mercer, if you are betrayed by someone important to you, how do you walk away while maintaining your dignity?" The auditorium grew slightly quiet. I adjusted the microphone. "Please do not mistake dignity for not crying or not causing a scene." The student looked straight at me. "True dignity is refusing to pay the price for someone else's mistakes. If you want to cry, cry. If you want to be angry, be angry. If you need to sue, sue. If you need to cut your losses, cut them quickly." I continued. "Silence can sometimes be a virtue. But if your silence becomes a blanket used to hide someone else's dishonesty, rip that blanket off yourself." Applause erupted. Standing in the stage lights, I suddenly remembered that day. "Harrison slid my ring onto Chloe's hand," he said. "If you refuse to be submissive, I will make Chloe my wife." And I answered, "All right." Once, that single word felt like the greatest humiliation of my life. But now I knew it was not a humiliation. It was a door. My own path, starting with all right. People tend to care about the fate of those who hurt them for surprisingly long periods. But in my case, Harrison and Chloe exited my life astonishingly fast. I heard a few rumors. Harrison was removed from the core of the Sterling Group and sent to manage a failing subsidiary in the Midwest. I no longer saw him driving a luxury car through Manhattan. Chloe accumulated massive debt from the lawsuit and the liquidation of her company, And I heard she left New York entirely. Richard's health declined, and Caroline stopped attending high society functions. When I heard these things, I simply nodded. It would be a lie to say I didn't think they got what they deserved, but their misfortune was not what built my happiness. They simply received the results of their choices. I am living the results of mine. That is all there is to it. I did not quit my company after getting married. Julian treated that as an absolute given. At the breakfast table, investment prospectuses sat next to toast and my mother's homemade plum jam. Julian would read the Wall Street Journal and occasionally ask for my take on market trends. When I told him, "I am eating right now," he would say, "My apologies," with a completely straight face and pour the coffee. That everyday life was entirely new to me. I learned a little late that the mundane presence of mutual respect seeps much deeper into the soul than flashy words of love. My mother changed too. She laughed much more often than she used to. At my company's events, she proudly wears her pearl brooch. In the past, she would say she hated standing out and sit in the back row. Now, she sits in the front row and claps louder than anyone else. One day, my mother suddenly said to me, "Eleanor, about that day at the wedding reception, yeah?" At first, I was so frustrated and so embarrassed I just wanted to disappear from that room. I listened quietly. But when you said all right and I saw your back as you walked away, I thought, this child can never be broken by anyone. My mother looked out the window and smiled slowly. I realized all I had to do was follow your lead. I squeezed my mother's hand. "I was only able to walk because you were there, Mom." "No." She shook her head. "I was able to walk because you did." Those words settled quietly inside me. On the way home that day, we bought my mother's favorite pastries. As she untied the ribbon, she laughed and said, "Remember when we couldn't even afford the luxury of eating something sweet?" Looking at her smile, I realized that the lawsuit wasn't the only thing we won. We had also triumphed over the days when fear made us small. I still have not let go of that old Brooklyn office. My company has grown, and we have expanded into beautiful, sleek high-rises. But I continue to renew the lease for that single room on the 7th floor. Sometimes, I go there alone. I replace the duct tape on the windows, wipe down the old desk, and stand in front of the whiteboard. There are no more photos of Harrison or Chloe on it. Instead, I have pinned my company's first business proposal, a copy of our very first signed contract, an old good luck charm my mother brought me, and a single line printed from my digital notes. "If he doesn't return, I will walk on my own." Whenever I look at that sentence, I want to tell my past self, it is okay to be scared. Your trembling hands are not a sign of weakness. They are proof that you are trying to move forward anyway. I was once asked by a journalist in a magazine interview, "Miss Mercer, was the incident with your broken engagement the downfall of your life, or was it a turning point?" I laughed. It was a turning point disguised as a downfall. My only regret is that I did not believe in myself sooner. If I could say one thing to my past self right now, it would be, "Well done." The journalist looked a little surprised, but I truly meant it. I was not flawlessly strong that day. When I tore open the envelope in the bridal suite, my fingers were shaking. When I held my mother's hand in the car, I was on the verge of tears. Right before I played the recording in the Oak Room, my heart was beating so fast it hurt. I took deep breaths over and over in the courthouse hallway. But I still did it. And because I did, I am who I am today. In stories, it is often said that living well is the best revenge. I think that is slightly incorrect. You do not need to become happy for the sake of revenge. Happiness isn't a weapon to flaunt to someone else. It is a quiet life you protect for yourself. Brewing your favorite coffee in the morning, calling your mother, facing difficult problems at work, clashing opinions with Julian, spreading documents across the table, and debating fiercely. Going to the grocery store together on the weekend and laughing as he seriously inspects the freshness of the vegetables. In those small daily moments, I feel that I am no longer controlled by someone else's mistakes. That is what closure means to me. Every time I drink a hot cup of tea at our small family dining table, I think to myself, happiness isn't something you prove to others. It is something you rebuild, piece by piece, every single day. Stripped dignity and stolen time do not take shape again immediately, but if you treat them with care, they will safely return to your life. At the end of my university lecture, I told the students this. When someone tells you to be submissive, if those words are meant to erase your voice, you do not have to listen. When someone tells you that you just do not understand, look closely to see if you truly do not understand, or if they simply do not want you to know. Love isn't a word used to make you small. Julian was standing quietly in the back of the auditorium listening. After the lecture, he handed me a bouquet of flowers. That was a good speech. I merely spoke the facts. That is exactly why it was a good speech. I smiled. On the drive home, the city lights streamed past the car windows. Waiting at a red light, I looked at my ring. The words engraved on the inside "Eleanor belongs to Eleanor" cannot be seen from the outside, but I know they are there. I know that those words, hidden from view, do not bind me, but rather allow me to stand proudly as exactly who I am. Since then, I have been approached by young women for advice on several occasions. A fiancé acting suspiciously, a male boss trying to steal credit for their work, a family member telling them that a woman finds happiness by enduring a little more. The shapes of the stories vary, but the root is always the same. Someone is using their silence to their advantage. I always tell them the same thing. You do not have to become strong immediately. You do not have to fight perfectly, but please, do not pretend you didn't see what you saw. A sense of discomfort is an alarm your heart sounds before anything else. You love them, so you want to trust them. You have been together a long time, so you don't want to break it. You don't want to cause trouble for the people around you. Those feelings are completely natural, but you must never hand over your life to protect someone else's lies. I, too, used to think I was a cold woman for gathering evidence. But now I know better. The one who is cold is the person who gave you a reason to doubt them. The one who is cruel isn't the person who confirms the truth, but the person who hides the truth to exploit someone else's life. Keeping records to protect yourself isn't a failure of love. It is preparation so you do not give up on yourself. Julian never asks about that heavy-duty envelope. Occasionally, when we visit the old Brooklyn office together, he stops in front of the whiteboard and simply says, "So this is where it started." When I reply, "You could also say this is where I ended it," he shakes his head. "No, this is where you restarted yourself." When I heard those words, I cried a little. He pretended not to notice my tears. I finally learned to call the kindness of pretending not to notice love. That is why I still haven't thrown away that old envelope. I no longer need what was inside. The trial is over. The damages have been paid. But every time I look at its torn edge, I am reminded, I am free today because the version of me from back then, trembling with fear, still managed to tear it open. On my wedding day, Harrison Sterling slipped my ring onto the finger of his childhood friend. He told me he would make her his wife if I couldn't fall in line. I said, "All right." That "all right" was not a word of surrender. I was saying I would not marry him. I was saying I no longer needed him. I was saying I would take back everything they tried to steal from me, piece by piece. And I was saying that starting today, I would walk my own path. I hesitate no longer. I am no longer a supporting character in someone else's story. The power to turn the page, the voice to declare the ending it all, belongs entirely to me. I am Eleanor Mercer. I am a woman who, on the day of her wedding, had her ring stolen and handed to another woman by her fiancé, yet stood tall and walked out under the gaze of everyone present. After that, I protected my company, won my lawsuit, protected my mother, and regained the strength to love someone once more. I am not a woman who shrinks when told to be submissive. I am sharp, I am determined, and I am a human being worthy of being warmly loved exactly as I am. And from this day forward, I will continue to choose my own life with my own two hands. Thank you for watching until the very end. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We will continue to bring you stories that resonate with the heart.